Hi friends, I'm going to show you how to use Conduit's abilities in Apex Legends Season 19. I've not really seen many people putting out guides on Conduit's abilities in detail, so I decided to make my own. Let's start with deciding whether Conduit would be a good legend for you to main. Like most legends, you can play Conduit any way you like, but her core abilities most suit players that tend to be behind their teammates a lot, especially because half her abilities actually require you to be looking towards your teammates. So if you're the kind of player that's often running to catch up your teammates, or perhaps you follow your teammates into fights and you play more of a supportive role, then Conduit's probably going to be a good fit for you. Let's look at how her abilities work and how you can best utilize her abilities to win more games. And I've got a bunch of stats as well as timings on her abilities, plus a few little tips and tricks on how you can use them more effectively. Let's start with Conduit's passive, Saviour's Speed. This is a nice and easy one. It gives you a speed boost to your sprint speed that does feel much like Bangalore's passive. For Conduit, however, it's based off the distance you are from your teammates, and there are 3 key criteria you have to meet to be able to trigger this passive. Conduit must be sprinting, so walking and sliding won't trigger the passive, although once you have triggered the passive, then you can sprint and slide and it will still remain active. The second criteria is that Conduit must have 1 or more allies outside of her tactical range, which is 50 meters long. And the third and final criteria is that Conduit must be facing an ally for roughly 3 seconds, and you kind of need to have your crosshairs close enough to the center of that ally. Once you do those 3 things, you'll then be able to trigger Conduit's passive. The cool thing about Conduit's passive is that there's no cooldown, and it lasts for as long as the criteria is met. Meaning, let's say you're 200 meters away from your teammates. Like in this clip right here, my teammates are in Jurassic Park, and I'm running towards them all the way from Watson's Pylon. And you see I'm getting the speed boost pretty much all the way running there, allowing me to close the gap way faster than with most other legends. So that's definitely a big benefit to Conduit's passive. In terms of tips, there are definitely a few I can give you. The first one is around the visual cue to help you understand when your passive is being activated. And the best way to tell is when you're looking at your teammates, you'll see a little green circle slowly start to complete. And as you look at the teammates for a few seconds, when it's completed that green circle, you'll see a little white Conduit speed boost figure pop up on your screen. And this essentially means that your passive is now active. As long as you keep sprinting towards your teammate, it will remain active until you get to within the boundary of your tactical. Another great tip is that you can keep your speed boost for about 3 seconds after you trigger it. So even though I said you do have to keep running towards your teammate, you actually do have a 3-second buffer, which means technically you could activate this passive and then use it in a fighting situation, perhaps to reposition, or even to spin back the other way and run for a couple of extra seconds with that little boost. So that's an idea on how to use Conduit's passive. Let's move on to Conduit's tactical. It's called Radiant Transfer. This one gives yourself and one teammate temporary shields. It has a 50-meter radius for your teammates. The good thing with that though is if you see in this clip, you can see the tactical does go through walls and objects, so you don't actually have to be right next to your teammate. As long as they're in that radius and you're kind of looking towards their direction, you're going to be able to give them these temporary shields. Now the shields themselves kind of happen in 3 stages. The first stage is where you see yours and your teammates' temporary shields filling up damaged and broken shields. And these are those green bars that fill up where your shields would normally be if they've been damaged and they're not at max health. You'll see a little green shield icon also pop up just above where your healing items normally are, and this whole first stage lasts for about 8 seconds, so you should see that shield item for at least 8 seconds. Now for each tick, temporary shields are granted as long as your shields aren't full. And I say that because it means your shield won't go over the maximum amount your Evo shield can hold. Plus, if you do take damage while your shields are charging, or even while you've got these shields in this 8-second period, it will pause your shield generation for a small moment, before then starting up again, and all of this has to happen within that 8-second window. For Conduit, shields are granted at somewhere between 7.5 and 12 shields per second, while teammates actually get their shields a little bit faster than Conduit, at about double the rate at which Conduit gets. Now once stage 1's over, you'll then move into stage 2, and this is more of a holding stage. You'll essentially hold any temporary shields you got in stage 1, but you won't be granted any new shields. Stage 2 lasts for about 20 seconds, and after this you then move into the final stage, which is stage 3, and this is where any temporary shields you have slowly start depleting back to wherever your shields were before. So at this point you really want to be healing up your shields, because by the time this finishes, you'll essentially lose all your temporary shields. It's also worth noting the decay of these shields in stage 3 happens much faster than you receive them in stage 1. In fact, the max temporary shields take about 4 seconds to deplete, which is way faster than it takes for you to actually gain all of those shields in the first place. A few tips I can give you for using Conduits Tactical. Firstly, a visual cue for when your teammates do and don't need shields, you can see by just looking at them. If you see the full white shield icon, it means your teammates have full shields. If you see it's orange or even red, it means that they do need shields, and this gives you a good visual indicator of when you might want to be using your tactical or not. Another good tip I can give you is something I experienced myself. You need to be facing your teammates roughly to be able to give them your tactical, but make sure you're facing the right teammate, as this tactical only gives it to one teammate at a time in addition to yourself as Conduit. But it doesn't automatically pick the teammate that needs it, which means sometimes you could accidentally give it to the teammate that doesn't need it. You can see that exactly in this clip. I'm pushing a fight with Horizon, Horizon's pushed up left and I'm flanking around. And at that point, you can see Horizon does need shields, so I trigger my tactical, but as I slide round I accidentally am looking at the Wraith when I trigger my tactical, who's not actually fighting in this fight, and she doesn't really need the shield. But because I'm looking that way, the tactical's given to Wraith instead of the Horizon who actually needed it, and unfortunately that means the Horizon gets downed, but don't worry, I do clutch up and I get the res in. But you can see I needed to look towards the Horizon on the left when I activated the tactical to actually have given my tactical to the Horizon. So just something to keep in mind, do watch out where you're looking and where you're targeting your tactical. Another tip is don't forget you can shoot and move while activating the tactical. So those are a few tips. Strategically for the tactical, I would say it acts as a nice buffer for you to heal. Now this could be after a fight, when you're cautious of a third party, you can activate this tactical just to give you a bit of a buffer while you heal up, which I've definitely done a good few times. I also recommend healing your health before batteries or shield cells when you've got your temporary shields through this tactical, and the main reason for that is because the temporary shields effectively act as a full shield, but it's not an overshield like Revenant's ult. So ultimately if you heal your shields to full and you've got this temporary shields activated, unfortunately you're kind of going to lose those temporary shields. On the flip side, you can also use it defensively as well, perhaps to give you quick shields as you're pushing into a fight and you don't really have time to pop a shield cell or battery. The final cool thing I thought I'd note with this tactical is that the cooldown actually almost matches the length of the tactical itself, give or take a second or two. But essentially that means you can finish using this tactical and be ready to go with your tactical fairly quickly after it finishes. So the point is, don't be afraid to use this tactical as much as you need it in the game. Also, with a gold helmet, that actually means your tactical comes back pretty much before the previous one finishes, so definitely something to consider if your team has a golden helmet to share around. So that covers the tactical. Let's finish by covering Conduit's ultimate ability. It's called Energy Barricade. This one fires a row of battery-like objects, they call them jammers, out in a row, and those deal 10 damage per tick to enemies caught in them, plus it also slows them as well. The ultimate itself lasts for about 60 seconds once it's up, and it's got a cooldown of 2.5 minutes. The thing with this ultimate is it can be a little bit tricky to aim, so the best way I like to think of it is think that you're firing 7 devices, but they all pop out of the middle device. So instead of trying to look at every single little indicator for each device at the same time, try and focus on that one center device in the middle there. And it always deploys straight, so if you can line that one up with where you want the ultimate to go, then the rest of the devices should just pop out left and right of that center device. So that should help you with lining up your ultimate. Another little tip that I saw from someone on Reddit is that if you look straight down at your feet, it then launches them out really close to you in a V shape. So that's another way if you want the ultimate to be a little bit closer to you and also in a slightly different shape from that straight line. A couple other things you need to know about the ultimate. It has a 10-meter radius and it takes 4 seconds to prime once you deploy it, which basically means they take about 4 seconds to start working after you've deployed them. So I always say it's better to use them early than late in the fight. A couple of other tips. You can actually halve the number of batteries you place by punching immediately after you place your ultimate. One of the benefits of this is that it only uses half your ultimate charge. So in small spaces, perhaps indoors, maybe you don't need as many batteries deployed. So you can use this technique and maybe save yourself some ultimate charge. A shout out to the gaming merchant for that one. I learnt this from watching his video. You can also use the batteries and jammers in the ultimate as cover because there's no damage pass through and they take 250 damage before being destroyed, which is a fair amount of damage, so you can use them like a little mini wall. Now strategically, you can use this ult as both offensive and defensive abilities. They are kind of meant to block off spaces and slow down enemies, and whether that's you pushing a fight or them pushing into you for a fight, there are different situations you can use these in. A good one here is this clip I showed earlier. I deployed the ultimate blocking the gravity cannon, which meant when they tried to use the gravity cannon to escape, they took damage and I even got a down because of it. And because of that, I was able to kind of 1v3 this whole team. So it works great at blocking off escape routes. but it's also good defensively. Here in this other clip I showed earlier, after we finished the fight, I deployed the ultimate indoors in the top floor of the building we were in, and that's because I could hear the enemy team pushing towards us, and we were able to win that second fight, basically because my ultimate zoned off that entire section of the top floor there. So again, that's a really good defensive way you can use it. Almost think of it like Watson fences in that situation. Do check out my video on Sunday, by the way, because I'm going to tell you all about how promo trials work, and it's going to be a really good one for you for ranked. But for this video, that's pretty much all you need to know about Conduit's abilities. Feel free to share anything you've learned about Conduit in the comments down below, so by me helping you, hopefully you're able to help others as well. For now though, thank you so much for watching, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you later.